Okay, hey, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today we have another nice update for you from the brand SWC or Swiss Watch Company. A little bit about them. Their founder actually started out at 17 years old working QA for the Swatch Group and worked his way up from there. Now, this brand is a micro brand that really focuses on Swiss-made, affordable, high-spec timepieces. Now, in terms of the type of watch, I consider this a pilot's watch. Some key common characteristics and design language when you're looking for a pilot's watch. Of course, you're just going to really want that balance of legibility and functionality. This is the SWC Hyper G, and it's a titanium pilot's watch. It goes for $565 direct. Definitely check the site for availability and pricing in terms of any types of sales or anything like that. And I think it's a really, really fun piece. It's actually kind of growing from their previous model, the Bunker, which I really enjoyed. It has a little bit of a similar kind of case dimensions and similar kind of design aesthetic, but instead of it being matte blasted, it is has some really, really outstanding high polish, but it's still made out of titanium, which is really cool. So you're seeing brushing, you're seeing polishing, you're also still getting that hard coating, which is outstanding. So with all that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and see how it looks. All right, guys, so first things first, here we go. Check that out. Really lovely sunray dial on here. Even though it's a black dial, it does have some nice transition to it where it can have nice hints of a deep kind of anthracite gray. The nice thing is that it is a truly black dial, so it's going to render mostly black, and then when you do get a couple of flashes, it's not like it's a gray dial that kind of has anything to it. It definitely is truly black. So if you want a black dial, and then that also does help with ultimate legibility, because this has really, really great high contrast features. Of course, those Arabic numerals that go all the way around the dial are very, very legible, and you can see, get it up close, it's just really well executed. There's really not a lot to get mad at here. You can see that finishing. Look at the transitions on that bevel. Very nice, very clean, screw down crown. Just a lovely, lovely piece, and very impressive hardware. Check that out on the buckle of this yet to be broken in leather strap. So very cool. Very quickly though, why don't I show you guys kind of the package of how it comes. So of course would be inside an outer box, but this is the kind of reusable portion of it. As you can see, extra strap. The hardware on this strap isn't quite as nice as the hardware on this one, so I decided to keep it on that one as kind of the standard strap. But I do like the texturing that's seen here on this style of kind of a more rubberized and performance-oriented strap. It even has a little spot here for extra spring bars, which I thought was cool. And then you also do get a little paper showing the regulation of your individual timepiece, and there's a little slot here, of course, for the warranty card. So very, very cool. I like that it is nice and tidy. It's not going to take up a lot of space. It's more of a watch wallet really than like a hardcore box or presentation or display, so I can really dig that. Now a little bit more into the specs of this piece. The width on here is 40 and a half. The thickness is, or should I say thinness, is 10 and a half. Lug to lug is 48 millimeters, so you can see nice from that perspective. I'd say it does have a little bit of a wider profile on terms of the shoulders of those lugs, so it is gonna wear, I think, a little bit more true to form, and really capitalize on kind of the legibility and boldness that you would expect from a traditional pilot's watch. This is made out of grade 5 titanium, which is very nice. It is brushed and polished, and then of course still has that nice hard coating also. In terms of the crystal, it's a sapphire, which is flat. I was going to say as you can see, but you can't really see it because it almost just disappears because of all the anti-reflective coating that's there. About 16 times application. Of course, when it's going directly against the studio light, there's nothing you can do about it, but you can see as long as it doesn't have some crazy outline, there's light on it, it pretty much looks like it's not there, which is very, very impressive. So moving on, you do have that signed screw down crown. Inside you have an automatic Sellita SW200-1, and you can see everything is nicely etched there, Swiss made of course. And then we get into that dial, that beautiful sunray dial, which is a staple across the line. It does have printed indices with 22 layers of X1 grade superluminova. So this is going to be quite the torch when we get to that time. The date window is at 6 o'clock. With black numerals over a white disc, and then of course this piece is water resistant to 10 atmospheres or 100 meters. I will say the date execution on this, although it is at the 6 o'clock, which I prefer, I kind of wish that they would have done reverse in terms of with maybe a black disc and then a white font, just to make it blend and disappear a little bit more. Or maybe you just gotta go all in and do some type of framing around there. If you're gonna make the date stand out, you know, maybe make it more of a focal point. And this is kind of somewhere in between. I feel like they didn't necessarily commit to the date window really a lot. And they, you know, so although they did move it from 3, which is great, I think, you know, even if they would have just added either a polished frame or just an outline frame along the outside of it, since they're using the white disc to make it stand out, it would have just looked a little bit more purposeful, which I would be able to, of course, appreciate, but I don't think it looks bad as is. Just a small critique, you know, from my eye. Now, the lugs on here are 22 millimeters, which isn't necessarily that normal for a watch of this width. Since it's only 40 and a half, but the 22 millimeter lug width does help the watch, I think, flow pretty nicely because of the wider shoulders on the lugs. It does help kind of make them seem a bit thinner because they have more cutout space from inside, and then because the watch is relatively thin, now it also helps the watch wear and ride very, very low slung on the wrist. So I think there are some reasons for that, and I don't mind it being 22 millimeters, especially when it comes on a pretty nice strap here, especially considering that really, really impressive hardware on the tang buckle. So the strap itself has a 2 millimeter taper, so it starts at 22, goes down to 20, and then of course this beautiful titanium buckle, which is extremely well finished. So with that said, let's go ahead, get this piece on the wrist and see how it wears. Okay guys, as you can see on my 7 1/4 to 7 1/2 inch wrist, it wears really well. It is bold and, you know, very legible, but you can see that it just hugs the wrist. That nice curvature that you see, how the case kind of slopes down, and then it's very accentuated, of course, by that beautiful beveled edge, highly polished. Then you get up close, so there's going to be some lens distortion, and this thing might seem a little bit larger than it is, but then you get some spot away, and you can see there's a lot more strap on top of the wrist and less watch. And then you can also notice that it does have that kind of wider case profile, although the ultimate diameter is only 40 and a half. With the wider style on the shoulders of those lugs, it does give it kind of a retro, almost barrel shaped profile to it. So very clean, very purposeful feeling. Although it does have some nice highlights and whatnot, it doesn't feel overly, you know, dolled up or dressed up. It feels like it has just the right amount, just to kind of show you, hey, you know, there's some effort that's been put into this case. Look at that finishing, the shapes. It all just flows really, really well together, and you can see it does sit very comfortably on the wrist, and that taper is much appreciated in terms of range of motion. So really nice. So I dig this one, and again, it's a pilot's watch, so it should be a little bit larger and it does render a little bit larger visually, so that works for me. And then of course that nice thin profile, that great milled tang buckle. You can really see that fine high polished edge just jump out at you, and there's some really nice fine satin brushing that also just impresses. So with that said, let's get it off the wrist, laid out for some lume shots, low light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. Oh yes, look at that. That BGW9 is just pumping away. It doesn't even matter that the seconds hand isn't loomed, because as it sweeps over those Arabic numerals and even eventually across the hour or minute hand, you do get to see it because it's so well backlit that you don't necessarily need it lit. I think it would have been nice to see like a white tipped seconds hand, which would have had, of course, some lume, or maybe they could have done some lume on the counterbalance or something, which is great. But again, this isn't really a dive watch, so it's not quite as important that in ultimate darkness you need to make sure that it's running. It's not like that's going to be the difference between you having air or not. So, but one thing I like to work in here is some low light transition, because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you'll be coming in and out of a building, maybe walking underneath an overhang, or maybe the shade of a tree, or just spending time in your favorite automobile. So it's nice to see what these colors and textures as well as the finishes render like in less than optimal lighting, to include some harsh lighting here that would typically expose any type of production defects. But you can see there might be a little cloudiness in the polish from just my fingerprints, but other than that, it looks fantastic. There's not a bracelet to kind of watch the light glide over for the brushing, but you can see it is quite uniform as the light glides across that brushed portion of the lug shoulder. So very nice. And then you can also see that even with like really direct moving dynamic light there, that dial, again, it's a black dial that just has a couple of strips. So it definitely is a nice high contrast brushing that's done there, versus sometimes you get those softer ones where it's just the whole dial is kind of just lit up and reflecting all the time. I do like this more high contrast style. I think it just looks a little bit more expensive and also is a little bit more functional in its execution. Sometimes it can look a little bit cheap on a sunray dial when the whole dial is just kind of all lit at once. I like that here you're just going to get that nice break and that contrast, even when we get to like this kind of spot, right, where the whole thing's almost washed out. I mean, it really takes particular lighting, but you can see for the most part it's going to be just riding right within this spectrum here, where you might just get a couple little streaks, and then hey, and some type of perfect storm of direct lighting situation, it might wash out what you're looking at, but otherwise it's still very, very legible, and you can see still pumping away really strong. And even in kind of those more twilight situations, not just the lume, but the nice railroad track that's been painted on there, printed on, still looks quite fantastic. So really nice, even all blacked out, but of course also quite nice when you got some light on it. So guys, closing thoughts on the wrist. It wears slightly larger due to that wider lug profile, but I think it makes up for it by riding really low, slung, and hugging the wrist. So it doesn't feel like some big top-heavy pilot's watch like some watches can feel like. It feels more, I just say sleek, in the fact that it rides very low, although it is a little bit wider, but hey, Lamborghinis are pretty wide and we all like those. So in terms of model variations, there's also, apart from this black dial, there's a blue dial, a green dial, and a slate gray, if you did want to go with that dedicated gray color, as well as a burgundy, and they all come in a sun ray finish. Now in terms of comparable models, you know, this is really so well spec'd for the price. It's hard to think of a direct comparable, but if you can think of a Swiss made pilot's watch, you know, under 600 bucks, that's made out of titanium. I won't even ask about the hard coating or, you know, any of the more intricate things, but just those specs, you know, with excellent lume, AR, you know, there's layers of AR on that sapphire, and you're getting a sapphire. So there's just a lot to like here in terms of on paper. So as long as you can dig the aesthetic, which, you know, is a very non-offensive one, I think it's very classic. This could definitely be a very versatile kind of everyday daily watch for a lot of different wrist types. In terms of the bottom line, when I think about it all, you know, this thing is just a true spec beast for the price. So again, if you like that aesthetic, you definitely won't be disappointed in what you get. I think you're going to feel like you're getting a bargain, and a lot of what I try to feature is based around that kind of idea that you're going to be getting more for your money than you would if you were going with something that's a little bit more mainstream. Even if it's from a name brand, sometimes outside of the mainstream can yield some really nice, fulfilling, and surprising results. So with that said, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you like the video, please do hit like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.